Hi, everybody. Good to be here. Thanks for joining us. This is the very first pre-show, very first start of this pre-show. We've got 10 minutes to go before our 221,001 A+ study group is underway. So I'm just getting things ready here. If you're watching this in the replay, you can jump ahead 10 minutes. There also will be links to timestamps in the YouTube video descriptions. You can jump to whatever you would like to jump to. How about that? It's all up to you. You have complete control. We'll have those timestamps usually there about a day after we are live. It's December. I haven't done one of these in 2 weeks. So the last week of November was Thanksgiving here in the United States. I should probably get the chat up and running. Hello, chat room. Let's pop you out so I can see what's going on in the chat. There we go. Boston checking in. Thank you for being here. I like to see where everybody's from in the chat room as we're getting things ready. Let me check and make sure I've got recordings going down here. You can see my Cylon is going down here on the bottom right. This device here is my streaming device, my OBS device. It is also recording locally. And of course, we're recording locally on the YouTube where we are streaming live. There's Jacksonville and Miami and Tampa. Florida's checking in. Hi, everybody. Isn't it nice to be in Florida right now? It's kind of nice, although it's cool up here in the Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Pensacola area. It was 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius this morning, if you're somewhere that is non-imperial. South Africa's checking in. Brazil is here. Arizona, Bangkok, Thailand. I've been to Bangkok, Thailand before. It's been a while, though. Rialto in California. Nice to see the West Coast here. Always good. DC is checking in. New Hampshire, Erie, PA. London is here. Welcome. El Salvador. We've got New York, Tennessee, and Arkansas checking in. More California is here. So we got the East Coast. We got East Side over on the Europe side. We've got the West Coast on California side. There's Utah. There's messages coming in on my phone. Let's dismiss. Should probably set that to do not disturb. There's Texas. There's Mars. Finally, Mars is checking in. Wondered when you were going to be here. Trinidad and Tobago, welcome. Got Fernando, California. Norwich in the UK. Boston's here. More Boston. Is it snowing in Boston? I bet it is. Or snowy. Salisbury, North Carolina. There's Tokyo. It's got to be late in Tokyo. Thanks for being here. Washington State. India is here. San Fernando, California, the British Virgin Islands. Very nice. Moncks Corner, South Carolina. I think I've been there before. Can you believe that? Fort Bragg, welcome. Houston, Missouri. There's Montreal. Wonder when my Canadians were going to get here. Always let Mrs. Professor Messer know when the Canadians have arrived. Her people. We've got Chicago. Norway is here. We are all over the place today. I saw a lot of people, you were waiting for me to hit that button to get this thing going. So it's nice to have the pre-show ready to go. Let me make sure I have things ready to go here. I think I do. Got slides here. Cameras are looking pretty good on this side. That's good. I think I've got previews ready to go. Yep, we're looking good here. Fantastic. There's Chicago, Haw River, North Carolina, Fayetteville, North Carolina. A lot of North Carolina. Check it in. I know the clock on my desk is there so I can see when things are going to happen. Now you'll notice over here on my mixer is also a clock. I'm kind of hiding it there. That's the right next to the green zeros is a clock telling me what time it is. And for some reason I can't see it. What I don't like about it doesn't have a second time. And I'm doing things on a particular schedule here. And this does have a little second clock, second hand, if you will, ticking down on the desk. It's just an iPad app. This is the, what's it called? Nightstand iPad app. Just lets me know when things are ready to go. And once we get started, I'll flip that around. It'll turn into my slides. So as I'm moving back and forth, it'll integrate with the keynote that I'm using here, and I'll be able to see what slides coming next. Very similar to the remote that you would have for PowerPoint. There's Arnold, Missouri. Paris, France is here. Welcome. Bonjour. Nice to have you here. We've got all 221,001 questions today. I have so much to go through with those. There's a lot going on. For it being the holidays, there's a lot going on right now. And there's the notice that I have a study group right now. Comes in a little late on my phone. I think I've got a 5-minute warning set. But that also means that all the emails have been sent out. All of the notices have been put onto Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So everybody should be arriving shortly. Vallejo, California. Cary, North Carolina. There's Vegas and Nevada. So Corey took the A+ 901, 902 2 years ago. Now, did you pass both of those? So you're reviewing the A+ again for the 1001, 1002. You must be renewing. Are you renewing by taking do they have a renewal exam for A+? I'm asking myself at this point. They do. They also have that online Cert Master CE where there's no heavy review, only takes a few hours, and you're renewed. It's another thing. I think most people are doing that these days. There's Manchester, United Kingdom. Welcome. We got about 4 minutes to go before we get started, and we'll do all Q&A in the first hour, and then I'll open up the phone lines and take questions from the chat room in the second hour, and we'll just break it down from there. Got questions done for today's study group. We also have questions for Thursday's study group. So it's the 1001 today. So it's 1002 on Thursday. So that's the schedule this week. It's all at professormesser.com/calendar. You'll be able to see what that is. Oh, look, it's a spam risk coming in on my phone. Dare we answer it? I wish they were coming in through. Could I answer it on my computer? Wouldn't that be great to listen to? Let's decline that since we have real work to do in a moment. That would be fantastic. How come it didn't come through if it came through my computer, I could run it through the mixer real quick and we'd listen in. I could talk through the microphone just like we do normally. But it didn't. That's sad. Wish that was the case. Now someone is, I think somebody's leaving. Got all kinds of things going on at the studio today. And there, YouTube tells me, hey, you're doing a live stream right now. That would have been good, wouldn't it? We find out what that spam risk was. It probably would have hung up or just been a message or recording anyway. Would not have been great. Not as good as you want it to be. And we have actual work to do in 2.5 minutes. Hello, Barbados. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Patrick from France. We are from France. Or Patrick is anyway. There's New York City. Welcome. I was just sending some notes to friends and family in New York City. Have some of that going on. We have some of the things. This is a very the whole system that we have here is the people that are doing things for me are all over the place. So mostly in the U.S., but doing that as well. There's Minneapolis. Welcome. There is the Socrative, professormesser.com/QA is how you can join. Unless you're on the Socrative app, and then you need the room name of Professor Messer, all one word. PROFESSORMESSER. There's Northern Indiana. There's Baghdad, Iraq. Welcome. Minneapolis again. If you want to know what those Socrative and the links for all of that, they're out on professormesser.com/live. So those things are all there. We got a minute to go. All my ducks in the row? I think they are. There's Fort Wayne, Indiana. Welcome. Another James. Half the Jameses here. So now that we have a minute to go, I think it's probably, I wish I had a clock on my screen. This is the only clock I've got. I was going to get rid of it and start the Keynote app. But then I wouldn't know when to get started. I guess I could if I went up here. I could still do that. So let's do that. Keynote right there. And get a green light. That's not the green light. That was the new button. There's the green light. That's what I like. So we're good to go there. All right. What else are we doing? I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we're just about ready to actually do a study group today in the next 10 seconds or so. So we'll figure this out. Hopefully these 1001 questions will be helpful for you today. And we'll get started now in, why don't we get things going? All right, everybody, here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the December 2019 Professor Messer A-plus study group. This is the 220-1001 A-plus study group. We do one of these every month where I ask you questions that you could expect to see asked of you on the 220-1001 exam, or at least the topics that you would be asked about on the 220-1001 exam, and we see how you do. Everybody gets to answer online. We get to roll up your answers and see what everybody was answering on their exams. I also have, in the second hour, a way that you can ask me questions. I will turn all of this around, and you will be able to find out how you can put questions in the chat room, how you can call in. We'll talk about all of that in the second hour. Today, you're going to answer questions along with everyone else. And the way you do that is you pop open a new browser window and you go to professormesser.com/QA. It's that QA that will get you to a link on a site called Socrative. It will redirect you over there. There is also an app that you can get for your mobile device. This is the Socrative Student app. I think there's also a Socrative Teacher app. The Teacher app's one for me. This is the Student app is the one for you. It will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word. If you need more information on how to do that, it's all on my live page at professormesser.com/live. Unfortunately, you will only be able to do that during the live event. If you try to do this when you're watching a replay, there won't be any questions there. You'll just be sitting there. So it's nice to be able to have you here for the live event so that you can join along with us. And if you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you on that page. And that question asks, a user is complaining about a burning smell coming from their computer case. Which of the following should be the first troubleshooting step for this issue? Now, if this looks like a question that looks familiar, it's a question you had last month. We call this our study group rewind question. We want to see that everybody can get into Socrative, make sure that you can see the questions, and you will see there are possible answers there waiting for you. Those possible answers, would be good if my head was in there. There we go. That said, remove the cover and visually inspect the system. Check the logs for any significant events. Disconnect the power source. Reboot the system into safe mode and perform a hardware diagnostic. Now, one of those is going to be the right one. You can see 97% of you say that a user complaining about a burning smell coming from their computer case. Which of the following would be the first troubleshooting step? Would it be remove the cover and visually inspect the system? Would it be to check the logs? Would it be to disconnect the power source? Would it be to reboot the system into safe mode? Or would it be to perform a hardware diagnostic? We'll come back to that question in just a moment. I want to thank you for being here. We've got plenty to go through. If you're wondering where all of this information is from, it's from my absolutely free A-plus training course that is available on YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube. Of course, there is a daily pop quiz question you'll get every day for A+. You can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter, or as you found this week, brand new, all of the daily pop quiz questions on professormesser.com/Instagram, where you get the question and then you can just slide the Instagram picture over to see what the answer happens to be. And that's been kind of fun to be on Instagram this week and doing that kind of thing. Also, don't forget that it's the holiday season. So if you're purchasing something from Amazon, it will be great if you followed the link at professormesser.com/Amazon. And you'll also be able to purchase things on Amazon as you normally do for exactly the same price as you normally do. But they'll send us over a little bit of a commission. Helps keeps the lights on here. It's a great way to help us without having to spend any money directly to Professor Messer. You can go to professormesser.com/Amazon. So a lot that's going on there. I will also sometime in this first hour give you information on how you can earn a continuing education unit credit. So we'll talk about that. Keep your ears open in this first hour, and we'll talk about that. All that we're going to talk about today comes directly from the 220-1001 exam. The 220-1001 and the 220-1002 are exams that were released at the beginning of this year. So they've been out almost a year, 11 months almost at this point. Those are the latest A-plus exams. They are both 90-minute exams. You have to pass both of them. The 220-1001, you need to get a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. And for the 1002, you need a 700. Now, if you took the 900 series or you were studying for the 900 series, and now you have to show up and figure out how am I ever going to figure this piece out, you can, of course, find out all of these things at professormesser.com/objectives. I break down all of the details about the topics that are out there. So feel free to go through and have a look at what you've got going on your objectives. You may be able to see that you've studied quite a bit. Only 20% has changed between the two. The structure of the exams is pretty much the same between the 1001 and 1002. So there's a lot of good options there whenever you start working through these. There are a lot of things to know on both of these exams. So we'll try to run through some of these topics as we go through this today. Also remind you that all of my videos are available to watch online, every minute of every video. Of course, there are downloadable versions of my audio and the video available on my website at professormesser.com/downloada+. This study group is available on a video replay on my website. There's also a podcast version of all of my study groups available at professormesser.com/podcast. And if you show up on YouTube tomorrow, you'll notice there will be a timestamp available. You can go back to any of the study groups on YouTube and jump exactly to a specific question, a specific answer, or a specific call-in in the after show. All of those are available thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. She goes through all of this after the fact and time stamps everything. It's really nice to have there. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier, though, about the user complaining of a burning smell coming from their computer case. Which of the following would be the first troubleshooting step for this issue? It's almost not worth going through all of the other options. Is it 98% of you say that it is disconnect the power source? And I think that is the first most important thing you should do if you smell smoke coming from an electronic device, is disconnect any of the power going into that device. You might be able to prevent any further damage, or worst case, prevent the device from catching on fire. You never want to have any of those problems occur. So hopefully getting rid of the power source is going to minimize anything and prevent things from happening from that point on. There is a section of the exam that talks about troubleshooting, and they ask you, or in the exam objectives, to know what you should do if you happen to see smoke or have a burning smell, and what you can do to fix or at least resolve this particular and troubleshoot this particular problem. Always a bad idea. When that magic smoke gets out, the system stops working. You have to keep the smoke inside of it. That's the only way we can be assured that these electronic devices will continue to work. So if you did answer C, disconnect the power source, you got that one absolutely right. Let's do some new questions now. Whenever you come to my study groups like this, the very first new question of the day is a question that is a performance-based question. Now, some of you may not realize that on your exam, it's not all multiple choice. We're used to seeing multiple choice questions, just like this previous question was, where I asked you a question and there were a choice of answers and you chose what you thought the right answer was. But the first handful of questions you get on your exam are not going to be multiple choice. They'll be anything but multiple choice. There'll be questions about filling in the blanks. You may be placed at a command prompt and asked to perform a function. It might be a matching question. There may be a drag and drop question. You may have to put things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. You never know exactly what it will be, but it will still be topics that come directly from the performance. These performance-based questions come directly from the exam objectives. And so I like to go back and on the very first question, give you a performance-based question. So let's have our first performance-based question. That's our first new question of the day. And the question asks, here it is, identify this memory. And what's interesting about this is the memory is just an outline. This doesn't help you folks that are listening on the podcast, I realize. It's kind of a bad question for you to have to do on the podcast. But I've got 4 different types of memory here. Number 1, number 2, and number 3, and number 4. I want to know exactly what type of memory this is. So this is, I'm not looking for a category. I'm looking for you to tell me the specific model of that memory. I want to know exactly what that is. So have a look at these. These are in, relatively speaking, these are pretty close to actual size or relative size between these. So you can see that you've got 4 different memory types here to be able to step through. This is a fill in the blank online. So you'll go to Socrative at professormesser.com/QA, and you can go through and answer 1, 2, 3, and 4 and tell me what you think these things are. So folks are already putting in what they think these answers are for these things. A lot of you know what these are. And I know it's difficult to tell because there's no ruler on the screen to tell you what the exact size is, but you should be able to figure out because the size of these is relative to each other. So you should be able to pick out an outline and go, okay, I know what that size is, so I therefore must know what these other sizes are. Some of these are very common types of memory. You probably see them a lot. Others you may not see a lot of, but you still see them around in devices. So it's important that you do understand what all four of these are. All four of these are, well, all three of the four are very common. One of them not so common. So there's my hint. There's the hint I'm throwing out to you to be able to identify what that memory happens to be. If you think you know the answer, answer that in ProfessorMesser.com/QA. From this point on, we're going to answer online. So no answering in the chat room. We don't want to have any hints in the chat room. We're going to want to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA to be able to answer all of the questions going forward. This is not unlike a question you might get on the exam. This one's a fill in the blank, but you might get one. This might be a drag and drop. You may have options on the side, and you may drag and drop them, or it may just put you at a case where you need to fill in the blank. Sometimes on the exam, they give you a lot of different options. They may give you 7 different options to drag and drop, which means there might be 3 of them left over after dragging and dropping. So you may find that you get almost all of them wrong, or all of them wrong because you have so many options available. So it's useful to be able to absolutely know what these things are. So we've had a moment, have a number of you have put these, you've locked in your answers. So let's go through this. And the question in the chat room is this like a question you might get on the exam where you get a picture and you have to match? Absolutely. They may give you pictures and diagrams and you have to fill them out or fill in the information that might be in a chart. Absolutely. This could be a question, which is why I presented this question to you. Number 1 on our list, let's identify that if you have anything that is using memory these days, flash memory, and all of these are flash memory modules. This flash memory, and the first one, probably the one the most common, is SD card. That stands for Secure Digital. I had an SD card on my desk I was going to show you that I just pulled out of a system. Do I have it still here? Nope, I took it off. But it's a very small card, so it works very well for a lot of our mobile devices. I have, in fact, the camera that I'm using here, camera that you can't even see it now, but that camera that I've got up there uses SD cards to be able to store information on the cameras that I'm using. We have the second card on this list, a little bit different. This is one that is in your exam objectives, and you may still run across this memory type on different devices, but I can tell you they don't have any new devices using this. That is an XD card. That stands for Extreme Digital, XD. That XD card seems like that's we should remember that one a little better. If you're online and chatting with someone, that's one you would remember pretty well, I would think, is the Extreme Digital. Then you have this tiny little card next to it. This very small memory module right here. Very small, at least relative to everything else that's around it. And in fact, it is very small to work with. That third one on the list is a micro SD card. It's the smaller baby version of SD. In fact, I have an SD card adapter that I can slide the micro SD card directly in and then plug in my SD card into the back of my computer because my computer has an SD card interface on the back of it. I, of course, have a USB connected SD reader that will read all of these, especially this last one. So we've got this one, CF, Compact Flash is the last one, CF, to have all of those there. So a lot of people are saying, well, do I go through this in my videos? In fact, you'll notice at the bottom on the answer page, this is from my video in section 3.4 called Storage Devices. And if you go to that video, you'll see this slide where I just put them all next to each other, took a picture, there they are. So this is a direct pull directly from everything that I've got there. So being able to work through those is very, very useful. In fact, you can see every SD type or a flash memory type they ask of you on the exam is in that picture. Very useful to have that. So that's where a lot of this information came from. Hopefully, I looked through the list of this. I can't grade it because it's a fill in the blank. A lot of you were spot on with this. You knew the SD card, you knew the micro SD card. The second one and the fourth one were a little bit more difficult to work through, but I think a lot of you did a pretty good job with that one. So that's our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that's one you were able to get through as well. I think I like going through these and getting a feel for the different types of questions that might be there. Let's shift gears a little bit and do some performance, move away from performance-based question, do some multiple choice-based questions. Let's jump into the next question that asks, after replacing a laptop LCD screen, the stylus no longer interacts with the operating system. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. We want to answer at professormesser.com/QA. And if you go there, you'll be able to see exactly the options available. Is it inverter? Is it NFC? Is it digitizer? Is it IR emitter? Or is it Bluetooth? Those are your 5 options. After replacing a laptop LCD screen, the stylus no longer interacts with the operating system. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Would it be inverter, NFC, digitizer, IR emitter, or Bluetooth? All 5 of those technologies are directly from the 221001, so we really can't dismiss any of them. They're all things we should know. In fact, if you don't know what one of those happens to be, make a note of it so that you can always go back and study up on what some of those topics might be. If you think you know the answer, again, no answering in the chat room. We want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answers. I've had to replace quite a few laptop LCD screens in my world. So that's one, whenever I get into this, it helps me a lot to be able to know where I might run into a problem. So absolutely go have a look at those and figure out where those things might be. See, lock in your answer. A lot of you have already locked that one in. I think a lot of you knew this one. I've not looked at the answers and see how you did yet. I'm going to be just as surprised as you are when we have a look at the different answers that are here. A lot of the questions on your exam will be these scenario type questions. You very rarely get trivia on the exam. It's usually one where there's a type of problem and what would be causing this problem, something that can make you think about what this issue might be. And as you thought about it and locked in your answers, 81% of you said the answer was C, digitizer. 7% said inverter, 6% said Bluetooth, 4% said NFC, and 2% said IR emitter. So 20% of you said something other than digitizer, effectively. If we had to go with the popular vote, that would probably be it. So our question here was talking about an LCD screen we replaced and suddenly wasn't working properly anymore. And that's because on the LCD screen we replaced, there was a digitizer. Allows us to use something like a pin to input directly from that and be able to work through those. The stylus that we would use for this interacts with the screen by touching the screen itself. So it's very common these days on your laptops and your tablets to have some type of external input that is touching the screen to do this. And it is the digitizer technology built into the screen that does that. That means if you replace this screen, you need to not only make sure it's the correct type of screen, but you're plugging in all the correct connections on the backside so that the digitizer is working properly. Well, that's one that really didn't fool very many people. 83% of you said, okay, digitizer is the right one. So this is one where this would be the most likely cause of this issue. Now, on this question, and people are saying, but it could be other things too, right? What if the problem's with the stylus? What if the stylus is our issue? Well, it certainly could be, but that wasn't one of your available options. If you look at these questions very carefully, the question is asking which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue. So you only have these 5 options to go through. And that means you should be able to narrow your scope. Don't think about things that aren't on the list. You're wasting your time on your exam. Knowing the strategy for answering the questions on the exam is almost as important as knowing the content for the exam itself. So understanding the type of questions they ask, the type of approach of these questions, and knowing that you're only going to need between these 4 or 5 things what the answer could possibly be should allow you to really focus in on what the right answer is. So don't worry about going outside the scope of this. Always stay within the scope of the question. That's an important one to be able to do that. Let's do another one. Let's do another multiple choice question, and we'll see how we do with this one. This question asks, A network administrator is creating a chart showing the throughput and errors for the company's internet connection. Which of the following would be used to create this chart? Which of the following would be used to create this chart? Would it be SMTP? Would it be SSH? Would it be SMB? Would it be SNMP? Would it be AFP? It would be a bunch of abbreviations, apparently, which are things that are extremely common in technology, is knowing all of these acronyms. A network administrator is creating a chart showing the throughput and errors for the company's internet connection. Which of the following would be used to create this chart? And your answers again, SMTP, SSH, SMB, SNMP, AFP. 5 different options there. On your exam, you'll probably only have 4 options available. I make my questions a little bit harder than what you would get on the exam. If you think you know what the answers are, no answering in the chat room. You want to lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Let's see how you did with knowing how you might create a chart showing the throughput and errors for the company's internet connection. Again, every single one of these options that I gave in the possible answers are all things you should know. They all come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. So if you happen to see one of these and think, I'm not sure what that is, make a note of it. Go back to my video, go back to your book, go to the internet, just search for it. Find out what that thing is that you don't recognize so that you'll remember it when you sit down for your exam. It could show up on your exam, and it would be nice if you went back and had a look at what those possible options might be. Let's now have a look at how you answered this particular question. The question again was, a network administrator is creating a chart showing the throughput and errors for the company's internet connection. Which of the following would be used to create this chart? And I would say we have a majority, strong majority in this case. Again, 68% of you say that it's SNMP. 11%, double digits, say it's SMTP. We need to get our SMTP and our SNMP straightened out, I think. 7% of us say it's SSH. 7% say it's AFP, and 6% say SMB. It's kind of a tie for third there, a 3-way tie for third. But almost 70% of you say it's SNMP. It seems like that's the one you would want to go with when you're trying to figure this out. The real key to this question is knowing what the administrator is trying to do. They're trying to show the throughput and errors for the company's internet connection. Well, your internet connection is probably going to show that information coming from a router, coming from a firewall, coming from some other type of infrastructure device. And a great way to query servers, switches, routers, firewalls, and other devices is through a protocol that's designed to do this. And it's a protocol built from the ground up as the Simple Network Management Protocol. It's in the name itself, SNMP. Simple Network Management Protocol is designed to gather information and configure information. You can configure these devices. You configure a router, configure a switch using SNMP as well. It's not just reading this information. There's different versions of SNMP. You should probably be familiar, especially with version 3 that integrated encryption, message integrity, authentication, and other capabilities in here as well. So that's the one you would go with. If you're communicating to a switch, you're talking to a router, you're gathering information from a firewall, you're almost always going to be working with SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol. Now, 10% of you said it was SMTP. That was the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. SMTP is used to send information to a mail server or send mail between mail servers. In this case, the question had nothing to do with mail servers. This was about gathering statistics, so SMTP would not be the correct answer. SSH, Secure Shell, is one that we would use to securely connect to a terminal screen or a command line prompt on a remote device across the network. SSH is what we would commonly use to configure a switch, to configure a router, to configure a firewall at the command line. But it's not used to gather statistics and gather metrics. You can look at stats on the screen, but it's not going to provide you with a long-term view so that you can create charts and diagrams from this information. SMB, the server message block, is the protocol that's used primarily by Windows to be able to communicate at the file system level, to be able to transfer files, to be able to print to a print queue. Server message block is the one to use. Now, if you're running Mac OS, There's a similar protocol, but in Mac OS, it's not SMB. It's the Apple Filing Protocol, AFP. So a different language, different style, but the functionality very similar. I can transfer files between Mac OS systems. I can print to Mac printers and that type of thing as well. Well, obviously, none of those are going to be gathering statistics for us. So the important answer here, and the one that 70% of you got absolutely right, was answer D, the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP. Well done with that one. You guys know your protocols pretty well. It's important to know protocols. There's an entire section of the 220-1001 that is nothing but networking, an entire domain of the exam. A lot of people get concerned about the networking piece. I have a set of course notes, though, where I document everything from my videos. I, of course, recommend that you take some notes, that you get a good book, that you watch the videos, do some hands-on, and get some Q&A. But if you look at this, my video is 137 videos for these two courses, over 18 hours of content that you would have to watch and go through to be able to create the notes. And of course, this covers everything from the exam. You have to know hardware, networking, laptops, printers, operating system, command line, security. It goes on and on. There's so much content for both of these exams. What I've done is go through every single video. I've gathered all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the charts and diagrams. I put all of those things there, and it worked out perfectly to have this information here. And you can find them at professormesser.com/1000 notes, 1000 notes, and find out more about this. These notes have everything inside of them. In fact, I have the notes here on my screen right now. Here they are. They're in both PDF form and a physical form. The PDF form is one that can give you these notes. Maybe I'll do it for two sides here. Here we go. So the 1001, over 57 pages of content. And you can see things like, well, there it is, mobile device. We can't see it here on my screen because my big head's in the way. But in section 1.5, mobile device accessories, you can kind of see the SD memory card, the micro SD memory card are there. For instance, here's a breakdown of all the different cables for mobile devices and so on. All of this in the course notes, ready to go. There's also a physical version of the course notes available. There's the book. So the same information, of course, it's just in a physical form. It's the same information. It's just made from dead trees. There's no big difference there. All full color, nice heavy stock paper. It's nice high quality. It's nice perfect bound like a paperback book. If you purchase the physical version, you get the digital version for free. So there's some of those available that you can find. Those are all available to have a look through that. You can find that at professormesser.com/1000 notes. So very useful to have that there. Hopefully this can help you as well if you're going through and trying to figure out the details in the exam. Let's focus ourselves on more details. Let's step through the next set of questions we have available. I have more here on the screen. Let's get our screens back up so I can find this. This one, not really going to help very much for the people listening in for this, but hopefully this will help you if you are watching, because this is more of a visual question. Again, the exam itself may present you with a question like this one that asks, what connector is this? Now, this happens to be a fill-in-the-blank question, so I specifically did not give you any answers on this one to choose from. You have to type in what you think this connector is. So to be able to do that, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please don't put that answer in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. We want to go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to put that in. This is sort of a performance-based question, isn't it? It's a fill-in-the-blank. Maybe it's one of many fill-in-the-blanks you would get a performance-based question. If this was performance-based, I would probably give you 4 different connector pictures and have you tell me what they are, or maybe drag and drop from another 7 different options to be able to do that. Let's give you a closer view of it. Some in the chat room are saying it's hard to see what that is. So let's zoom up on it. There you go. Now you can see a little bit better what this one happens to be. And by the way, when you start looking at these different types of interfaces, cables, connectors, you don't always have the luxury of being able to see every side of this. It's often connected to a device inside of a computer. It's hard to even see down where it happens to be. Those are the types of things that you will find with this. So hopefully that can help you too when you're going through this and having a breakdown of those. This is one I think that can help you as well. A lot of you are giving me information. Some of you are spot on with this one. Some of you are being very vague. I think it's used for this particular subsystem. No, you got to be more specific. There's a name for this particular interface type. So this would be something you would have to break down and see exactly what this happens to be. If you don't know what this is going to be a good one to go back on and have a look. So lock in your answers at professormesser.com/QA. I'm going to let a few more people answer on this one. Some of you aren't quite sure. I know when you answer the question, you put, is it this, with a question mark at the end? I know maybe not exactly where we would be able to find exactly what this is, but you still see this in a lot of different computer cases. You will end up using this type of connector no matter what's going on. So feel free to break it down and be able to put those answers in that. Now, let's see how we did with this one. If you answered that this is a Molex connector, you got this one absolutely correct. This is not a SATA connector. This is not used for this is not an HDMI cable. This is not, I wouldn't call it a PATA connector either, although there are some SATA drives and PATA drives that do have Molex power connectors on them. So that is one way that you could be familiar with what this happens to be. This is often called a 4-pin peripheral power connector because the name Molex actually refers to a company that made the original connector. There are many companies making these connectors these days. AMP, for instance, makes this connector. It's a mate in lock. You don't need to know that. We just sort of call it Molex these days to be able to do that. But if you called it a 4-pin peripheral power connector, I'd take credit for that. If you called that the 4-pin power, I would accept that to be able to do that and have those capabilities there. If you have fans in your computer, if you have storage devices, optical drives, and other types of peripherals, you may be using these types of connectors inside of your computer. We're finding that more advanced systems are requiring fewer Molex connectors. It used to be Molex was all we used. And now we're finding other types of connectors for power inside of our computers that are not Molex, but occasionally you'll still have a case fan that uses Molex. Okay, well, needs those 5 volts. We'll plug it in and get the case fan going using that Molex connector. So a lot of you did great with this one. I'm looking through the answers. Almost everybody chose Molex. A few of you chose different ones like RJ11. That's definitely not an RJ connector. It's not a USB type B connector. There's other types of connectors, and there's a huge list of connectors you need to know for your exam. So make sure that you go through and have a look at this and be able to be familiar with what those connectors might be on those lists. And hopefully that's something that can help you too whenever you start looking at all of these and having these pieces there. You may be surprised at what you would find on those Molex connectors. A lot of people are saying, hey, these colors weren't what I was expecting. Well, that's okay because the colors are not a standard piece of this. The colors can be anything. They could be all black. They could be all black cables coming in. As long as they are different is the important part. The color of the cables is not standardized. And knowing the color of the cables, not important. Don't ever worry about memorizing the color of power cables for your exam. Networking is a little different. Networking, we use colors very importantly in networking. But that's one that you would run into for all of those pieces. Let's do another multiple choice question. This is going well. We're swimmingly going right along with this. So let's have a look at what different options might be available. I've got a multiple choice question right now that is asking the question, which of the following best describes a cloud-based service that provides instant resource provisioning through an online control panel? Which of the following best describes a cloud-based service that provides instant resource provisioning through an online control panel? And you've got some different options available for this. Those options are rapid elasticity. You've got resource pooling. You're going to have an option of on-demand self-service. Another option is external cloud. And lastly, measured service. So your question asked, which of the following best describes a cloud-based service that provides instant resource provisioning through an online control panel? Is it rapid elasticity? Is it resource pooling? Is it on-demand self-service? Is it external cloud? or is it measured service? There's an important set of things we need to know because all of these sound very similar to each other. They sound very familiar. And by the way, all of them are from, again, your CompTIA exam objectives. So you have to know what each one of these things happens to be, but make sure you read through the question very carefully. The question asks, which of the following best describes a cloud-based service that provides instant resource provisioning through an online control panel? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You're going to find on the 1001 exam, by the way, that there is an entire domain for cloud computing that, when I summarized it, was about 3 videos long. Not a huge amount of content, but a pretty big percentage of the exam, especially relative to the other domains. So unlike domain 3, which is hardware, where you have all these different kinds of hardware you need to know, and it's a certain percentage of the exam, section 4, domain 4 on cloud computing, is another part of the exam where you really do have to know a lot about every single little thing because they're going to ask a lot of questions about a relatively small amount of information. In this particular study group, people in the chat room saying, what about other questions about IaaS and SaaS and PaaS? Yep, I've had other study groups where we ask questions about that because you have such little amount of that section 4 of that domain 4 available. So absolutely, you'll see a lot of them as they're going through this. So read through this question very carefully, see if you can understand exactly where it is trying to focus you, and then answer the question that best describes this particular thing. And I think that is the important part of this question, is it's asking for the best description of what this happens to be. Let's see how we did with this one. Well, an even 50%, 49%, not even a majority, say it's on-demand self-service, answer C. 26% say it's A, rapid elasticity. 12% say it's resource pooling, 10% say it's external cloud, and only 3% say that's a measured service. So if we had to decide, there's really 2 big ones we're trying to decide. Is it on-demand self-service or is it rapid elasticity? Let's break down this particular question. This question said, not only are we looking for a cloud-based service that provides instant resource provisioning, we want to be able to do this through an online control panel. And that really should lean you in a particular direction. For example, as we look at the option that was available for on-demand self-service, this is one where we as the end user get to build the cloud out because of ourselves, because of what we're doing. Adding our own software, building our own servers, adding our own network components, and doing that whenever we want to, because it's on demand, and doing that as self-service, being able to log in and perform that function ourselves. We don't have to go to a third party to do this for us. We don't have to submit a request or open a ticket to have all of these things here. We can do all of this ourselves. In fact, in many cloud services, it's not even a cloud-based control panel. They simply have a direct API into the cloud computing infrastructure. They send it some particular commands, and it builds all these things automatically. That's where we would focus on to be able to do this. And that's why it suddenly becomes not tricky. Suddenly now we're starting to understand more about what the question is asking, and we're better understanding what the possible options are. So let's break this out and see if we can figure out what that thing might be. Let's go through this question one by one and see if we can break down what is it trying to get us to say in this one. So which of the following best describes a cloud-based service that provides instant resource provisioning through an online control panel? And as we've already said, on-demand self-service describes that exactly. And this question did ask you what best describes that particular thing. So you've got on-demand self-service was spot on. It describes it completely for all of those things. Rapid elasticity is another one. Rapid elasticity, 25% of you said rapid elasticity. And that is a type of characteristic of cloud-based computing that can scale up or scale down as different demands require it. Now, rapid elasticity, although rapid's in the name, It doesn't mean that we're logging into a cloud-based front end and we're typing some things in to do this. In fact, rapid elasticity may be even faster than that. It may automatically determine if there's a load and automatically orchestrate and build out new systems based on that. You may not even have a human intervention when you're talking about rapid elasticity, but rapid elasticity is describing a characteristic of the cloud computing and not a way to control the cloud itself. There are many different ways to have your system be elastic, but when we're talking about instant resource provisioning through an online control panel, we are being very specific with how we are rolling that out, and that specificity really requires that we choose C, on-demand self-service. That's how we're doing with all of these things. We've got 12% of you that said resource pooling. That's another good one to be able to work through. Resource pooling is one where we have an entire pool of resources available, such as storage space. And then as you build out new systems, you can drag away from the pool and build out different resources available from that available pool. So another thing to have there. We've got external cloud, which really describes where the cloud is located. It's another one to go through and have those there. And then lastly, we've got measured service, which means that we can see exactly how much the service is being used. That really didn't describe at all what we were asking in the question. Whenever we start looking at cloud-based services giving us instant resource provisioning through an online control panel, that's really pointing us directly to on-demand self-service. That is the characteristic we're looking for, and it's an important part of cloud computing. In fact, I have this functionality on Amazon. You'll see this functionality on other cloud. There's the one on Amazon. So you log into Amazon and you want to launch a virtual machine. You want to build a web app. You want to build using virtual servers. You want to connect to an IoT device. You want to start a development project, or you want to register a domain. You just click that web-based front end and boom, you can launch a virtual machine on EC2 on Amazon in 2 to 3 minutes. So that is our on-demand self-service portal. That's what we would call that. Again, some of these things have nothing to do with being elastic. Building out some servers, connecting to an IoT device, starting with development project may not have anything to do with making things more available, for having more capacity. It may just be a way to manage the system. So that's another one of those terms. All 5 of these terms, by the way, as I mentioned before, come directly from your CompTIA exam objectives. So if you see any one of these and you think, I'm not exactly sure how resource pooling fits into this, well, it's in the video. You can, of course, go to my videos. This one happens to be section 4.1, Cloud Models, where I talk all about these type of characteristics and functions of cloud-based technology so that you can be familiar with these all, again, on the exam objectives. Again, professormesser.com/objectives will take you to all of that. Well, we've gone through some cloud computing. Now let's do some questions that are not about cloud computing. We can move on from this. I've got another one ready for you. This next question asks, an LCD monitor has a single pixel that is constantly illuminated with a green dot, even when the background color is black. Which of the following describes this issue? Is it an artifact? Is it a stuck pixel? Is it a motion trail? Is it a dead pixel? Or is it invalid refresh rate? An LCD monitor has a single pixel that is constantly illuminated with a green dot, even when the background color is black. Which of the following describes this issue? Is it an artifact, a stuck pixel, a motion trail, a dead pixel, or an invalid refresh rate? Got 5 options available. All 5 of them are real things. So now we have to figure out which one of those it happens to be. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can lock in your answer. I think the answers in the chat room are better than mine. Some people say annoying is the right answer, and I'd say you're probably right to be able to know all of those. So I would find that annoying. I used to have an LCD television that had this problem. A single pixel, constantly illuminated green. And there's nothing more annoying than that particular kind of problem. What is that when the background color is black? What is the best description of that particular issue? We do want to know. When we run into that, lock in your answer, professormesser.com/QA. No Googling. Stop Googling the answer. I see you. Don't Google that answer to be able to figure it out. We're going to pretend we're taking the exam. We don't have any of these things available to have any of this. Hopefully that's something that can help you as well as you're stepping through what all the different options might be. So go through and have an idea of what that yours was red. So other people have different colors as well. Maybe it's not always the same one. Mine just happened to be green. Who knows what it might be whenever you're working through all of these. Let's see how we did with this one. An LCD monitor has that constantly illuminated green dot on the screen, even when the background color is black. What best describes, or which of the following describes this issue? 54% say stuck pixel, 39% say dead pixel. So we are sort of torn there. We're very close to each other. 54% say stuck pixel. That is the winner. But 39% is a pretty big number for dead pixel. Only 6% said artifact. 1% say that's an invalid refresh rate. And 0% say that's a motion trail. So which one is that? Obviously, these two that I put on here, stuck pixel and dead pixel, are slightly related to each other. They're almost very similar, almost the same thing, but almost, not quite. There are differences between these two, and the subtlety of these differences becomes important when you're looking at a question like this. When you're talking about video, if there is a pixel that is constantly bright, it is constantly lit. It may be lit green, like this question. It might be lit red, like the question, like folks in the chat room were saying, mine was lit red, or it might be lit another color. It could be any color at all that your screen would support. That is a stuck pixel. It's stuck on. It's always there. It's stuck in that one color, and it's never changing that color. If you have a pixel that never lights up, that it's never lit, you just have this one pixel on the screen that is always black, well, that's a dead pixel. So you've got the two different terms that you do need to know. If it is colored, if it's lit, if you're allowed to see the light coming through, you've got a stuck pixel that is constantly bright. Some people say dead pixels are always black. That's a pretty good determination of those two. How do you fix a stuck pixel? It's a question in the chat room. Very often you can't. It is not. It is a bad piece of hardware. It's something that does not get fixed. I will have many people send, I get emails all the time with people telling me, no, here's how you fix it. You do this or you do that. Some people even say you push the screen. No, don't touch the screen. Do not push in on the screen. That is how you break all of the other pixels, is you push it down. Don't do that. But there is hardware that is turning on and turning off the ability to see through the different layers of those colors. And when you have bad hardware, you eventually have everything bad on the other side as well. And having that stuck pixel, absolutely annoying, such a problem. Now, why wouldn't it be some of these others? For instance, artifacts. If you see odd things on the screen, that's an artifact, especially when things are moving around. You're seeing things happening. And if things are moving on the screen and you're seeing kind of a ghost of those or portion of that video on the screen as the thing is moving, or you're moving the mouse on the screen, you're seeing parts of the mouse as you're moving back and forth, then that would be a motion trail to have those there. So those are all video problems you need to know about. All of those things were on this list as well. The only thing we didn't talk about was an invalid refresh rate. Not very common to see on your LED, LCD displays these days, but the invalid refresh rate can certainly be an issue, especially on some of the newer LCD screens where you have different refresh rates that are supported, especially if you're a gamer and you want that higher refresh rate. You may find, depending on how you're plugging in and how your system is configured, you may not get that refresh rate. They may be invalid, but it's not going to show you a stuck pixel. It would simply be a slower refresh rate on your screen. The best option here, the only option that really describes this issue with that single pixel constantly illuminated, is one that is stuck. If you answered B, 54% of you got stuck pixel. Absolutely correct. That is the way you do it. So that is one that you can always work through to be able to figure out what it might be. Stuck pixel. Many people are finding that LCD screens are being made a little bit better these days, a little bit better QA, a little bit better process to prevent stuck pixels, but there are certain manufacturers that in the past, and perhaps even today, say that a certain number of stuck or dead pixels is perfectly acceptable and they won't accept a return. I don't accept that. I think all of your pixels should be working. And if your pixels are not working, your screen is not working, especially if you're someone who is doing a lot with these systems. Why would you accept that stuck pixel or that dead pixel? So you never know what you might run into. That question, again, coming directly from section 5.5 or 5.4, troubleshooting video and display issues. That's the one to be able to work through. Yeah, it's a much better thing to see these days. We don't run into so much of that anymore, but on the older devices, yeah, that was certainly an issue. Let's do another question. I've got one that asks, I click on my side, a system administrator is configuring IMAP-S on a mobile phone. Which of these would best describe this configuration? A system administrator is configuring IMAP-S on a mobile phone. Which of these would best describe this configuration? Would that be incoming email over TCP 993? Would it be outgoing email over TCP 25? Would it be incoming email over TCP 110? Or would it be incoming email over TCP 143? Lock in those answers. A system administrator configuring IMAP-S on a mobile phone. Which of these would best describe this configuration? I'll go through all four of these again for those of you listening on the podcast. Is it A, incoming email over TCP 993? Is it B, outgoing email over TCP 25? Is it answer C, incoming email over TCP 110? Or is it answer D, incoming email over TCP 143? You think you know the answer? Lock in that answer. ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Please no answering in the chat room. That's the way to do it. You can always go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA anytime during the live event to be able to answer these questions. If you're watching this on a replay, none of this will be here for you. You have to be here live to be able to see it. If you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be, you can always check the calendar on my website that's in the right sidebar, or you can go directly to ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. I've also got links there to be able to work through those pieces. If you want to know exactly when that's going to be, where it's going to be, there's a link there to Google Calendar, so you can add it to your Google Calendar, so it's always there. I update my Google Calendar, and it updates on yours. It's like magic. Great way to do it. This is one that you will run into on these exam objectives, which is configuring something on a mobile phone. There's so many different things to configure. And this is a good example of configuring something on a mobile phone. In our case, we're configuring IMAP-S on a mobile phone. You have to know how to be able to do that. These days, it's almost more important to be able to configure your mobile phones than it is to configure your desktop or laptop computers. Certainly just as important, I would say so, to be able to have that here. Let's see what you thought the answer was. Let's see if we can break this one out and see what's here. The system administrator is configuring IMAP-S on a mobile phone. Which of these would best describe this configuration? We don't know. Did not get a majority on this one. 40% or 39% say it's A, incoming email TCP 993. Taking the lead, 41%. 42% say it's incoming email over TCP 143. Answer D. 15% said it was answer C, incoming email on TCP 110. Only 4% said it's outgoing email over TCP 25. So how would we break this down? How would we be able to see what this happens to be? Well, we need to understand what we're asking for. So IMAP-S was really the one we wanted to break down. So if we're trying to retrieve email messages, we would be using IMAP, which is the Internet Message Access Protocol, and knowing all of these different pieces to have it there. So IMAP, pretty useful. In fact, one of the most common ways to retrieve and manage email on our mobile devices these days. So as we break this down and start trying to figure these things out, IMAP is probably the one, and we're thinking in line, well, that makes sense for IMAP to be able to have it there. And if you're configuring on a mobile device, we need to know where the IMAP server is, and we need to know the username and password we're going to use to log into that device. But the question didn't ask about IMAP, did it? The question specifically asked, a system administrator is configuring IMAP-S on a mobile device, which is different than IMAP. IMAP runs over TCP port 143. IMAP-S is running IMAP over the secure socket layer, SSL, or what today is called TLS, and that uses TCP 993. So there's where we want to focus on all of these different port numbers. You have to know all of these on the exam. So IMAP-S is one running TCP 993. This question asked about configuring IMAP-S on a mobile phone. And by the way, why would you ever not configure the S part of IMAP? Never install a mobile device with IMAP. Never, never, never use IMAP on your mobile device. You should check your mobile devices now and make sure that you're not using IMAP. So make sure that you never configure IMAP on a mobile device. You never use IMAP on a mobile device, because that is communicating to the IMAP server by default. It's communicating without any type of encryption. So there's absolutely no way to prevent someone from seeing that information as it's going over the network. So we want to be sure we're always using IMAP-S. That should be the one that we're working through. If you ever work through any of these, that's where I would like to go, try to figure out all these different pieces. So as we're looking at this, we can see that we're not sending outgoing email. IMAP's not used for outgoing email. The simple SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, all the different protocols, is used for outgoing. We probably wouldn't use on TCP 25 either, because that's not encrypted. It would not be incoming email over TCP 143 because that is not protected. It's not encrypted. That would not be the right one to use. We're using IMAP-S. We would be using TCP 993 to be able to retrieve those email messages. That would be answer A. 40% of you chose answer A. That is the right answer. Incoming email over TCP 993, the way to do it. So those of you who are looking for some networking questions, boy, you got one. That was kind of a hard one, because you do have to know the port numbers, what they're used for, and how they apply to a particular scenario. This is very common on the exam, by the way. You're not going to get a question on the exam asking what port number is used by IMAP-S. It's not going to tell you straight up. It's not going to ask that. And in fact, this question is asking it and then asking a little more about it. Is it incoming email? Is it outgoing email? Is it something else that we would be using? Well, these are the things we need to know on the exam. We need to apply when that particular port number is used and how it is used. And this was a really good example of that. We have a little bit of time. We have 3 minutes left. We can squeeze in another question, can't we? Let's do one more. Our next question, probably our last question of the day, or at least the last question I'm going to ask you, because you'll have plenty of questions to ask of me. Question is asking, each time a certain application is launched, the local firewall configuration is updated to allow incoming connections. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? Each time a certain application is launched, local firewall configuration is updated to allow incoming connections. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? Is it NAT? Is it UPnP? Is it MAC filtering? Is it DMZ? Is it whitelist? Those are the options to have this here. Is it NAT? Is it UPnP? Is it MAC filtering? Is it DMZ? Or is it whitelist? Lock in your answers. The question again is asking, each time a certain application is launched, the local firewall configuration is updated to allow incoming connections. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? See if you can figure out what that happens to be. And being able to break through all of those different parts of the question. You have to break the questions apart. You have to see what they're really asking. We're kind of fortunate on the A+ that the questions are relatively straightforward. The questions are about 2 sentences long. It's giving you a particular scenario and asking you about the answer. Once you get to Security Plus, they're very long paragraphs. There's very involved information in the questions. It's going into a lot of detail and combining 2 and 3 things together. Fortunately, the 1001 and 1002, not quite as bad as those. So hopefully that will help you as well when you start working through all of those different pieces. It might help you as well. Have those different options available. Let's see how we did with this one. This may be a good one to break through and to figure out all these pieces. Let's see what we did. The question again asked, each time a certain application is launched, the local firewall configuration is updated to allow incoming connections. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? How do we do? Well, 47% of you say, oh, that's a whitelist. That's what that is, to have those there. 17% say it's UPnP. 16% say it's MAC filtering, practically a tie for second place. 12% say NAT, and then 7% say DMZ. Well, one of the key pieces of this question, if we break it apart, was that there's a local firewall configuration, and it's updated to allow incoming connections. Each time the app is launched, the configuration is just updated. You didn't have to do anything. It's just automatically there. And whenever something like that is happening, it's probably going to be a universal plug and play, a UPnP. In fact, that's exactly what UPnP is for. Could you imagine giving users at home a requirement that say you're going to launch this app, you're going to start a service on your local machine. Now you need to go into the firewall configuration on your router. And every router is a little bit different, but it's somewhere find something called port forwarding. Change the port forwarding to take your external IP address on the internet, forward it to the internal IP address on your local network. You can find those, right? Then I want you to set the port numbers that are used by this application to be able to forward that. Now, this application uses 4 different port numbers, so you need to create 4 separate lines of port forwarding in your router. We're not going to tell you how to do that because every router is different, but you have to do that to make this app work. And then when you're done with the app, go back to your router and turn those things off. That would be a mess, wouldn't it? People who know how to do this, like me, get this wrong all the time. It becomes a real pain to be able to figure out how to properly port forward. Well, that's why we created UPnP. So you start an application on your computer. The application finds your local router using UPnP, finds your local firewall, talks to the firewall and says, I'm on the inside, so I'm a trusted person. Please change the configuration to allow different devices now to communicate through there directly to my device. Open up that port, allow the communication flow. That was it. Now, if you're thinking that's fantastic, it's so easy to use this, that is a great feature, you would be wrong. This is a horrible feature. This is an awful feature to have turned on because you have an application, maybe it's one you trust, maybe it's one you don't, that is now opening up holes in your firewall to allow people from the outside into your internal network. And once they get on the inside to your service, are they able to hop to a different service? Are they able to do different things? Having this automation is good because it removes some complexity. But generally speaking, and I would say the vast majority of IT professionals would say, this is a really bad idea because now you have no idea what's going on. You at least need to have the control to be able to do this. And although it may be a little more complex, and you have to learn how to do the port forwards, and you have to turn it on yourself, and you have to turn it off yourself, this is something you probably do not want to have automatically happen on your network. You may never know when your network is open to the outside because of universal plug and play, and that's why the best practice for this is to disable UPnP. Now, if you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, then what you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. Click that link. A form will open up. Put in your name, your email address, and the subject line. Put that this is the December 2019 to 21001 A+ study group. And in that message, put the super secret code word of the month of UPnP. Universal Plug and Play. UPnP. And if you put all of that in and send it to me in about a week or so, I will send you back an email that has been digitally signed that says you must have watched this for continuing education unit credit. Here is your 1-hour webinar category CEU. And maybe if you're collecting CEUs for continuing education to renew your CompTIA certification or another certification, you'll be able to use that particular CEU. Now, for our answers, UPnP was the right answer. 20% of you say it's UPnP. Now, why wouldn't it be whitelist? Now, whitelist is a thing. A whitelist, and generally whitelist is referring to a URL list. Almost universally, almost 100% of the time, whitelist is referring to URLs. It's referring to where someone on the inside is able to communicate to on the outside. A whitelist is not ever referring to an incoming connection that is updated automatically on a firewall. That is never a reference of a whitelist. Although it seems like that's a configuration. It's allowing traffic through. Doesn't that match the term of whitelist? It does not. A whitelist is a static list of URLs. That static list of URLs is configured in a device, and it is allowing people to communicate to those different remote sites using that list. So 46% of you chose whitelist, but that would not be the right answer to have that there. UPnP is the right answer. 20% chose that. 15% said MAC filtering. MAC filtering, great to be able to limit what MAC addresses on your network are able to communicate, but it's not something that a firewall configures automatically each time an application is launched. MAC filtering doesn't work that way at all. So that would not be something. MAC filtering almost always configured manually by your network administrator, being able to have those things there. The NAT, network address translation, 11% of you said NAT. In this particular case, we didn't actually say that there was any type of translation happening with IP addresses. We didn't say that there was a change to the external address, that we weren't changing anything about the internal address. There's no mention in here about network address translation, and that would not best describe the functionality that we listed in the first part of the question. And lastly, DMZ, which, by the way, is probably where you should set up a separate server, put it into the DMZ, configure your port forwarding into the DMZ, and never allow anybody onto the inside of your network. Unfortunately, that does not describe what happened here. It's the exact opposite of what we describe here. Only 7% of you chose DMZ. That would not be the right answer. The right answer here, the one that best describes this functionality, really the only one in this list that describes this functionality, is UPnP. You've got the universal plug and play as something you can use to be able to do that on your network. Hopefully you're able to get through those, understand the pieces of all of those. As I mentioned, every single one of the questions we went through today come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have these objectives, you are way behind. You need to get those. That should be the first thing you have, is the exam objectives at professormesser.com/objectives. That is going to be able to tell you exactly what you need to know on the exam, exactly what topics you need to memorize. Everything is in here. This should be your checklist that you use for everything. If you want to know when you're ready to take the exam, these objectives will tell you. So make sure you take advantage of those. You can download and get a link to the latest objectives at professormesser.com/objectives. Well, we've gone through a whole hour of questions, of me asking you questions. We're going to turn this around and have you ask me questions in the next hour. But we do one of these study groups, at least for each one of these exams, once a month. You'll be able to find that for all of this. The next study group in 2 days on December the 5th, we do a 1002 A+ study group. We also have some already scheduled for January, on January the 7th and January the 9th of 2020. You can come back and do that. You'll find where all of these happen to be. If you want to join us for our Network Plus study group and our Security Plus study group, or any of our live events, you go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll be able to do exactly that. So that might help you figure out when we're going to be live, and you'll be able to join us and follow along as we go through this. Stick around for the after show. I'll turn this boat around. You'll be able to ask me questions directly. So there's plenty more we're able to go through. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and follow us on YouTube. If you want to subscribe, you want to click the bell, whatever the kids say to do these days, that's what you should do out on YouTube. It really does help us a lot. And by the way, there is also, as I mentioned, this week, follow me on Instagram, professormesser.com/Instagram. You get a daily pop quiz question on Instagram. So that may be where a lot of people are spending time these days. And it's a great way. You'll see the question. You can swipe the picture and see what the answer is right there on Instagram. Don't forget about my course notes. A great way to support the site and a great way to get content to study for your exam at professormesser.com/1000notes. And don't forget, support us on Amazon, professormesser.com/Amazon for all of your holiday shopping needs. Go to professormesser.com/Amazon. That really does help us too. And it costs you nothing. Another great way to support what we're doing. Stick around for the next hour. We've got plenty of questions coming in line. There's people already putting things in the chat room. We'll be able to answer them. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. All right, everybody. Let me click a few things on my side and get the phone lines up and running. Thanks for joining us in that first hour. I need now to get my phone lines up next to me on this computer, if I can find those. I'm going to host a show. Let's start a show, and then I'll give you the phone number that you can use to call in to this show. First thing I need to know on this list is how I can call in to this show. I got to find my Skype. I put it up here before we started. There it is. I'm going to call in, and we'll make sure that I can get everything running, and then I'll tell you what the number is so you can join us as well. So bear with me one moment as we go through this, and I'm going to type in some numbers on my side and see if it says enter my 6-digit PIN number. It doesn't sound very secure, only 6 digits. And it says, welcome. There we go. So now you're able to call in as well if you'd like, or you can put questions in the chat room. Instagram is Professor Messer, all one word. You can also go to professormesser.com/Instagram to be able to find that. Feel free to have a look at this. We've also, if you're anywhere in the continental United States, you can call in and ask me questions using a telephone with your voice. I know an uncommon way to approach this. You would call this toll-free number 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies is 855-785-7545. We also will take questions over Skype. Skype, you can use the same number for no Skype minutes. It's absolutely free to use this on Skype. You put a +1 at the beginning, so it's +1, 855-785-7545 to call in. And you can ask, you can ask anything you'd like. Will I answer anything? Probably not. But you can certainly ask anything. I'm more than happy to go through that. Question from the chat room. If you put down the 12-volt 4-pin connector, that was mostly right. There's 5-volt in there as well. But the 4-pin connector is really what we're talking about. If you say 12-volt 4-pin connector inside of a computer, people are going to go, oh, the Molex? Yeah, of course, that's what that is. And that's a perfectly generic term to be able to use for that, to have all of those there. So you can also, if you don't have Instagram, you don't have Twitter, you can also get an email from me. You go to the Professor Messer website, and the right sidebar from the main page is a link to join any of our email groups, and you'll get an email with the daily pop quiz question. There are thousands of you that get that email every day. You're nice enough to read through it, I guess, and answer the question there. It'll take you back to my website where you can see what the answer is. So there's plenty you can do there as well. Let's now go to the phone lines. Let's pop open one of these to the 318 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, I am William, and I am from Louisiana.
Thanks for calling, William. What can we do for you?
Well, I want to say thank you for all your videos. They've helped me out a lot. I'm actually going to take the Core 1 in about 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to ask if I could get any last-minute motivation or good luck from you.
Well, you, of course, have all the luck in the world. We can. Everybody who is here is sending you the good vibes right now. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people watching, so hopefully we're all giving you the right kind of vibes to be able to pass this exam. The one thing, if you got a couple hours before you go, now is a perfect time to go through your exam objectives and start checking things off. Make sure you can understand what each one of those technologies is. Maybe there's one that jumps out at you that you weren't recognizing. Maybe something that wasn't there when you read through it the first time. You can maybe circle those and cram really quick on those particular topics. But at this point, it sounds like you're ready to go. It sounds like you're in the zone. You're ready to show up. The thing that I would probably tell you is your focus now should be on the strategy for the exam. For CompTIA exams, they're a little different than other industry exams. You can jump to any question at any time. It's not one where you have to answer the first question. It takes you to the next question. And with some exams, you can't go back. But with CompTIA, you can go back. You can go forward. You can jump all the way the last question first. You can jump to the middle of the exam. So take advantage of that. If you get to a question that you're not comfortable with, you can jump over it and come back to it later. You can click a button at the top and flag that question. Some people have a strategy of skipping the the performance-based questions at the beginning. There might be 5 or 6 of those. You can skip them completely, go directly to the multiple choice-based questions. Just check your clock and make sure you have plenty of time to circle back, because I find that the multiple choice-based questions will often jog my memory for things that will help me with the performance-based questions. Now, that strategy might work better for you or not. Everybody works a little bit differently, but those are some things on the exam that might help you get through the exam a little bit better. And I love it when the exam in one question gives me the answer to another question that was somewhere else in the exam, and it's a good opportunity to take advantage of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm feeling pretty confident, so just thanks again for all your help.
Best of luck. Let us know how it goes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's fantastic. It's one of those things where if you ever are trying to figure out, what do I do last? What do I do? What are the last things I should do? I would say the last 7 days, the last week before you're ready to take the exam, that's a good time to pull up those exam objectives. You may find things on the objectives you completely forgot about, or that you never saw the first time. So it's important to know exactly what could be asked of you. There's a number of people that will tell me, I took the exam and they asked me things I was not ready for. They asked me for something called UP&P. I'm like, oh, the universal plug and play. Like, I wasn't ready for that. Well, it's in the exam objectives. There's no reason you shouldn't have been ready for that. So take advantage of all this information CompTIA gives you. They're basically giving you everything you need to know. Absolutely take them up on that. Get the objectives, professormesser.com/objectives. Let's go to the next caller, 972. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from?
Hey, Professor. I'm Jeremy from Dallas, Texas.
Hey, Jeremy.
I just wanted to ask you, in regards to that last question that got me thinking, is there a way you can change which port a app operates on by default, or does it depend on the application?
Wouldn't that be nice if you could just yourself decide what particular port number these apps will use? It is always up to the app itself. Whenever you start up a service, maybe it's a game, maybe it's a file transfer service, you're effectively turning your computer into a server. It was a workstation, and then you clicked a button, you started this app up, and the app starts listening. We call it in the world of networking, it's now listening on a port. It opens up a port on your local computer, and it's listening for anybody else to connect. And that particular port that it opens is always controlled by the application. There's nowhere in the operating system to set this. There's nowhere in the registry to turn this on or off. It's all with the application itself. So if the application has a section that allows you to modify these port numbers, then you can change it to anything you would like. If the application does not allow you to change these port numbers, then you're sort of stuck with it. Most applications, though, have some way to do it. Sometimes you change the application settings in the registry. So maybe there is a registry setting, but it's associated with the app, because what you'll find is that you may be running one service that's using that port number. When you start this other application, it may want to use exactly the same port number, and you can't do that. If a port number is already open and in use and somebody is already listening on that port number, another application can't use the same port number. So very often you will find an application gives you the option in the settings to change that. Instead of running on port 80, I'll run on port 8080. You'll see that sometimes, just so it can avoid other applications doing a similar thing. That's where I would focus my efforts. It's not guaranteed, though. I've used plenty of applications that have no clue how you change any of the port numbers. It's locked down, and you sort of have to work around it if you run into a conflict.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your answer. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling, Jeremy. That's a good question too, because you will run into this, especially when users have this set up on their computers. In fact, having these apps that open up ports, that listen on ports, is that your network administrator and your security administrator don't want you using these apps on your network. We spend so much time with our firewalls making sure we're preventing somebody from connecting to your machine. And many, many years ago, when peer-to-peer was suddenly the hot new thing, and we were using Napster and LimeWire, people were coming to work and turning on these capabilities and effectively turning their computer into a server that anyone from the internet would not only be able to access the files that are in particular directories on those computers, in many cases, able to access all the files on the entire computer. And there were many, many information breaches that were created just because somebody installed one of these peer-to-peer apps. Not something you want to run into. Let's go back to the phone. 757. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, yeah, Billy, I got a question about the 1001.
Can you pick up that phone? It's kind of hard to hear what you're saying there.
Hello?
Hi, thanks for
calling.
calling.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. What's your question?
So basically, my question was,
I don't know what his question was. Went a little awry there, didn't it? We've got plenty to go through, though, with 757 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name's Kyler.
Hey, Kyler, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Just have some question about high-level formatting and low-level formatting, and just the difference between those.
Whenever you start looking at formatting in general, whenever somebody says, I need to do a low-level format, you can ask them if they happen to be at the factory creating these hard drives, because that's where low-level formatting takes place, is at the factory. There are, in some cases, in very rare instances, you may be able to find a utility that effectively is able to perform a low-level format just like they do at the factory. It is almost never advisable to use those types of apps. There's never a reason you would need to. Whenever they do that low-level format at the factory, they are first configuring it and making it sure that it's able to support a higher level file system on top of it, and it identifies places on the drive that may not be working properly. They can block that out administratively so that your operating system doesn't use that portion of the drive. So almost always when somebody talks about formatting their computer, almost 100% of the time, they're talking about performing a high-level format where you're choosing a file system. I'm choosing NTFS. I'm choosing FAT. I'm choosing EFS. I'm choosing some file system, and I'm writing that file system onto my drive so that I can then store files on it. That is always going to be a high-level format that we perform in our operating system.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Kyler.
That's very helpful.
Appreciate you calling. That's one of those also that you'll see these utilities are out there. Do not run these utilities. It's such a bad idea to start changing low-level format parameters that were set at the factory. They know what they're doing. They've got the equipment to be able to configure and make sure that they are blocking out sections of the drive that are not going to work properly for your data. The last thing you want to do is have a drive that's not reliably able to save data. That's the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. And indeed, we really don't need to when you're starting to work through that. Let's go back to the phones. 513 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
How's it going? My name is Mackenzie. This is my first study group I've been in as far as A+ is concerned. I just had a quick question about the exam objectives. I've heard a lot about them, especially from yourself. And basically, I'm struggling with port numbers. If I were to go through the exam objectives and if I were to write down all of the port utilities that I see in the exam objectives, like LDAP or TLS or something, would there be possibly other port numbers that I didn't see in the exam objectives on the actual test, or would I be safe to just stick to what the exam objectives show?
I would say, and for the vast majority of these, what is in the exam objectives is really everything that's going to be in the exam. Now, CompTIA even puts in the exam objectives itself, it says, this is a summary of what's on the exam. It's actually quite a detailed list of what's on the exam. But they say, we could ask you things that are not in this list. They leave that open. But the reality is they don't seem to do that at all. The exam objectives are so detailed and they stay so close to the exam objectives that you're not going to have a problem on your exam finding those things. And specific to port numbers, if you are looking at Section 2, which is the networking section on the exam objectives, the Section 2 asks compare and contrast TCP and UDP ports, protocols, and their purposes, and it lists out all of the ports and protocols you need to know. This is a very specific list. It lists out 21 is FTP, 22 is SSH, 23 is Telnet, 25 is SMTP, and so on. And this is it. Now, obviously, there are thousands and thousands of well-known port numbers that people use for different applications. You don't need to know anything but what's in that list in Section 2.1. That's it. even when they talk about other protocols that are elsewhere in the exam. For instance, they bring up in the exam in section 2.6, they talk about VPNs. Well, there's certain port numbers that are used for VPNs that are very common, but they didn't put those port numbers in section 2.1. So from my perspective, if they're not specifically writing that port number in section 2.1, I would not bother memorizing it for the exam. Now, later on, when you get into a job, you're working with VPNs, you're probably going to need those VPN port numbers eventually. But for the exam, stick with what's in 2.1, stick with what is very specifically written on the page, and you're going to be just fine. There's no good reason that I found to go outside the scope of what they put into their exam objectives, because you could be spending all of your time going outside the scope, and that's not really going to provide you with any benefit when it comes time to the exam. My common response to people when they are working through these exam objectives is, if you know everything that is listed in these exam objectives, you're going to do absolutely fine on the exam. Even if they ask you a couple of questions where they go off the range a little bit, they go outside the scope of those exam objectives, and sometimes they do, don't worry about it. You know everything else they could possibly ask. And as long as you know everything that's in that list, you're going to do just fine. Don't sweat the weird stuff and the things outside the scope. Stick to that list, and you're going to pass that exam.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Mackenzie. I think that's a good best practice anyway for the exam. And sometimes, and we found this as well, CompTIA has verified this, they will sometimes ask questions about topics that are not in the exam objectives, but they also often don't count those. They put them in to see what people are going to answer, sometimes in preparation for a newer version of the exam, and it doesn't count for you. It doesn't count against you. It's more of an experiment that they're doing, and you get to be the guinea pig. Congratulations on that one. From the chat room, some folks are asking on these multiple answer questions, if you choose all the answers, does it count as all correct? Is there partial credit? Is there a way to get some credit if you get some of them right and some of them wrong? CompTIA says there are certain questions on the exam where they might give you multiple choice or multiple answer, and you might get partial credit, which is basically a non-answer from CompTIA. There's a frequently asked questions on the CompTIA website where they said, we could give you partial credit. We might not give you partial credit, but we could. There might be a case of that, which doesn't help you at all for the exam. But they answered the question, didn't they? They said a qualified maybe. Perhaps that is exactly where we want to go to be able to do that. Back to the phones. Let's go to 858. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from?
Hi, Professor. This is Frank. I'm the idiot who showed up late for his Network Plus exam. I don't know if you remember me or not.
I sort of remember this story. Give everyone who's listening a summary, Frank.
Well, the day I had scheduled my Network Plus, I changed it and I forgot about it.
This was like at the last minute you remembered.
In the last minute, I showed up. I was 5 minutes late, but the proctor was so nice. He let me take the exam. But anyway, I had to put my CCNA studies on hold because a lot of these places, I mean, although I have Network Plus, and I said, well, that's a more advanced certification. They said, no, we still need the A+. Like one place I interviewed, they said, yeah, we understand that, but we still want A+, and if we hire you, you take the test, you pass it, we'll pay for it. So I'm still waiting to hear from them. So now I have switched from CCNA to studying A+.
Isn't that ironic?
And I noticed there's a lot of overlap, so I skipped over the networking stuff because I know that stuff right now. So I'm concentrating on the hardware and some of the other stuff in the A+ exam. But I do have a question about A+.
Sure.
Okay, so this is the confusing part for me. It's about the CMOSS and the BIOS. So I understand that nowadays the BIOS is not on the CMOSS anymore. I don't think there's a CMOSS chip on the motherboards anymore. So why is it that they're still talking about going into the CMOSS and changing like the boot setup or stuff like that? I don't understand. They still say, oh, you need to get into the CMOSS. Is that just because of legacy or?
Well, if you remember earlier on in the study group, we were doing those power connectors, and we talked about the Molex connector. And the Molex connector that's in your computer is probably a connector that is not made by the Molex company. Then Molex is the name of a company that was making those connectors originally. It could be that your connector inside of your computer is made by AMP, but we don't call it an AMP connector, and we don't call it a generic 4-pin 12-volt connector. We just call it Molex because we've always done that. From the very beginnings of when computers were created, it was a very common reference to that connector, and now we just sort of call it Molex colloquially, even though it may not be a connector that was actually made by the Molex Corporation. When you get into situations like that one, that's a very good example with CMOSS and BIOS, where it was a CMOSS, there was a chip there, and we just sort of called it that as, oh, we're changing the CMOS configuration. And we have sort of now, the name BIOS and CMOS have now become very synonymous with each other, even though technically they are not the same thing whatsoever. They're obviously very different in what they are. The BIOS being the software, the CMOS being what we used to store that information in on the computer. These days, of course, all of our flash configurations, all of our BIOS configurations, and in many cases, the BIOS itself is stored in flash memory. So just like the same flash memory you'd have in a USB drive, the same flash memory you have in an SD card, there's just a little flash chip that's soldered onto the motherboard of your computer. So that's one of the real interesting parts about networking hardware is, even though these terms really mean something else, even though these terms are things that we don't use anymore, like SSL, we don't use SSL anymore. We use TLS, but we never call it TLS. We call it SSL. CMOS and BIOS is a similar thing. It's important that you know the difference because you're a computing professional and you need to know this for your exam, but you're going to find even people like me all the time saying, oh, I need to change the CMOS config on that, just because we've done that for so many years and we just can't unprogram ourselves out of it.
So kind of like when they say NIC nowadays the NIC is just incorporated into the motherboard.
Yeah, there's no physical card. Yeah, it's just stuck. It's a chip that's on your motherboard. Yeah, that's your NIC. Oh, well, it's not really a card, but there it is. But we'd still refer to it as the NIC.
So when they refer to the CMOS battery, that battery is not providing power to the CMOS anymore because there's no CMOS chip. It's just for the real-time clock.
You're absolutely correct, sir. That's the only thing it's really doing these days, is making sure that when you unplug your computer, that the computer at least still remembers what the date and time is.
Just one last thing about this subject. So on, for example, laptops, they have battery inside. Do they still have that nickel cadmium little battery for? Or they don't have the battery. This is so-called CMOS battery. Do they still have it?
Oh yeah, there's a battery on the laptop motherboard as well. It's on there. It might be a little bit different, or it may still be that CR3023 or 3032, whatever that big round flat battery is. You'll absolutely find those on laptop motherboards as well.
Even though the laptop has its own battery inside, you still have that CMOS battery, right?
Well, as on my laptop, the one I have sitting next to me, I have no way to take that battery out of there, but that battery could, and it does, go down to what effectively is zero. So it doesn't provide much battery. The reality is these nickel cadmium, or not nickel cadmium, the lithium ion batteries we're using these days really stop before they get all the way down to zero, but it effectively isn't providing the power for your configuration of your date and time. It's designed to provide power for the rest of the computer. And in other laptops I've had, I can remove that battery. I can get rid of it completely. So if I remove the battery out of my laptop, I'd have to manually put in the date and time every time I turned on my computer, which would be a significant problem too.
Got it. Well, thank you, Professor. You're an awesome resource.
I appreciate your calling. Good luck, Frank.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
That's isn't it interesting, though, that Frank, instead of going forward, or what people perceived as going forward to their CCNA, has had to what people perceive as going backwards to the A+. But in his case, there's a job on the line if he passes A+. So do you take the CCNA where there's no job, Or do you take the A plus where there's an absolute job there? That's a no-brainer. Of course you're going to take the A plus. This is a very good example of when people say, what should I take next? What certification do I take next? And people will answer, oh, you need to take this. You need to take that. How do you know? How do you know what the right direction is unless you know what that person's specific situation happens to be? You have to know what you want to do next, and then I'll be able to tell you what certification you want to take next. There is no straight line. You're not on a rail with IT. It is really more of a branching. So you're sitting here. Where do you want to go next? You can go there, you can go there, you go there, you go there, or you can go there. What do you like to do? All right, let's send you in that direction because there's jobs everywhere for this type of thing. You just have to figure out what you like and what you're able to do with those things. It's an important aspect of this. Back to the phones. Has been holding for a while. Let's go to the 601 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor. My name's Stevie, and I'm calling from Mississippi.
Hey, Stevie. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Well, I currently work in retail, but I'm trying to make a career change into IT. Last year, I got my A+.
Nice.
I got my Network Plus in September. I got my Security Plus last month.
Wow.
But I can't seem to find. I can't seem to get any callbacks from employers for entry-level positions like help desk. Do you have any tips for anyone trying to make that career change like myself?
I do. Well, give me an idea of what you are doing now to get your information in front of prospective employers.
Well, right now, I'm doing the normal thing like going on ZipRecruiter, just sending out my resume to any entry level position that I can find. Like the PC technician position and the IT help desk positions. I've made a LinkedIn, but it's not particularly good right now. Other than that, I just go on DICE to try to find any entry-level positions, but I can't seem to get any callbacks.
You got the good foundation going, and going to the normal DICE.coms, LinkedIn's of the world are good places to find organizations that are posting or looking for help desk positions. It's a great foundation. You're doing exactly the right thing there. I do recommend getting a good LinkedIn page going together. I recognize without having any job experience, your LinkedIn page looks a little sad when you're looking at it, but it's a great way. And in the industry, the people who are already here, we use LinkedIn to be able to connect with each other and keep track of what everybody's doing. And in some cases, letting people know when a job posting is coming up and pulling people in from other places. It's a very good way to network with people you've worked with in the past. There's other ways to use LinkedIn. I have some people that just connect to whoever they like on LinkedIn, even whether they know them or not. My LinkedIn, I only connect with people I've worked with. And that way I know I've got a very well-tuned group together. But in your case, you don't have a job that you've been in. You don't have anybody you can add to your LinkedIn. The only thing I would recommend is make your LinkedIn page a very good representation of your resume. Make sure you put your experience there and the certifications that you've earned, so at least people have a foundational knowledge of you. And you can, of course, put posts on there. LinkedIn's sort of like the professional form of Facebook, where you can put things into that list of things you're doing. And that brings up my biggest recommendation for you, which is you've done the foundation, but you don't have the strategy for meeting the people in the industry. And that's just probably one of the most important parts of job hunting, is not knowing where the jobs are. You need to know the people that are already working at the places where the job openings happen to be. And I mention this because in my career, I've probably had 15 different jobs, 50 different titles in different companies. Some of those were working at the same company, and I moved up from engineer 1 to engineer 2, or worked from a consulting engineer to a systems engineer. There's all kinds of different titles these companies will use. But in some cases, I moved from company to company to be able to change the goals and objectives in my career. The first job I ever got in IT was with a computing company, a retail store, effectively, in South Miami. And it was a job that this company had the contract for all of at the time Dade County, now Miami-Dade County, to cover all the county offices with computers. So I spent all my time delivering printer cables, installing hard drives, doing kind of grunt work, field sales, not field sales, but more field engineering type work. Nothing too exciting. It was certainly not very technologically difficult. It was swapping a cable out or replacing a monitor. But I didn't know anybody. They hired me effectively sight unseen. I did go to an interview, and for some reason, they hired me out of college. What they did at that point was give me my foot in the door at every other job I got past that point. So the next 14 jobs I ever got, I knew someone who worked at that company. Sometimes that person I knew worked in IT. Sometimes that person I knew did not work in IT, but I knew somebody who worked there. So that was the important part. In fact, it was a part that surprised me at how important that was now that I look back through my career. So the challenge you have in front of you is, how do you meet those people if you've never worked with them before? You have to go where they are. And many times, a great place to meet these people is at local user group meetings. If you are in a geography that has a user group meeting, there's a Microsoft user group meeting, Cisco user group meetings, WordPress user group meetings, any type of user group meeting. But for what we do, we probably focus on Microsoft, VMware, Cisco. Those are great user groups to go to. So you're not only meeting people in your area that are doing this type of thing, you're now meeting the people who work at these companies in our areas. And now you can ask them questions. Hey, I'm looking for a job and a help desk. What do you look for in a help desk person? Another good thing to mention is that a lot of times in these companies, people who are already employed there will get a finder's fee if they bring somebody else in who ultimately gets hired and stays on for a certain number of months. So there may be a financial advantage to getting your resume from you and taking it to their help desk manager or to their HR team. And I have people on LinkedIn, that's all they do. Hey, if you're looking for a job, send me your information. And then they pass that name up to HR. And because they were there first, they've locked in that finder's fee. So there's a win-win for you. You're looking for a job. They could get a finder's fee out of this. You've already got some solid certification. They've now met you at the user group meeting. They see that you're not a sloth. You seem to put yourself together very well. You speak very well. You're so well-spoken. That maybe this could be something we can work with you. And then you get to go to, maybe they'll call you for an interview and you get to say, yeah, I met Roger at the Microsoft user group meeting. Oh, you know Roger. Okay. Now there's that connection. And it's surprising how strong that particular connection is, even though you're looking at it like, I just met the person at a user group meeting. It doesn't seem like that would be worth as much as it is. Actually worth quite a bit. In the world of IT, in the world of just people networking, I call it, to be able to do that. So that may be a good thing to do. Take advantage of that. It's surprising how few people really doing that. Plus, you get to go to a great user group meeting. You get to learn more about the technologies you're working with. And you can talk to these people and ask them, if you don't have an opening at your place, have you heard about other places that have openings? Because I'll tell you, it's a small group. It's a small neighborhood in these geographies. We all know where everybody is. We're all friends with everybody. We know when different companies have openings. We know when things are going on. They may know about a job that you don't know about or that someone else doesn't know about that isn't even being offered yet. Now's the time to get your resume in, and you just need a way to do that to get your foot in the door.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. I never even thought about that. Real quick, I just want to say thank you so much. You've been a huge help. I followed your course through my A+, through my Network Plus, and through my Security Plus, and it's honestly the reason that I passed all three of those. So just thank you again. You've been such an amazing resource for me.
I appreciate it, Steve. I'm glad you watched. I'm glad it worked out okay. To be fair, you actually did the hard part. I did the easy part of this side. You're the one who has to pass the exams. So congratulations to you as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate the call. Thanks. And people in the chat room even say, I started with the Windows 7 user group in Chicago. It's a great thing to do. It's actually fun to go to these user group meetings and see the technologies they're talking about. You learn something every time. And the people there are just so nice. They're not trying to keep people out. They want more people at the user group meeting. It's more fun to sit around and talk tech. We're all a bunch of propeller heads. We all want to sit in there and talk about what the latest thing was and the latest problem and the latest whatever it was. It's remarkable what we're able to do with all of those things. Let's go back to the phones. Back to Florida. 727. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah.
Hello.
It's Jesse from St. Petersburg.
Hey, Jesse. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I'm the one that asked about answering multiple answer questions. I would imagine that if everybody did that, if there was a multiple answer question, you just answered all the questions, it wouldn't be fair. But I just thought I'd ask anyway. Do those things count if you answer maybe more than the required?
What CompTIA will do in the question is they will tell you how many of these you have to answer. So they will say, pick the number of protocols in here that do a certain thing, choose 3 or choose 2 or choose 4. They will tell you exactly the number to choose from, and they don't let you submit the question unless you've chosen the right amount. So you have to choose the right number in there, but it'll pull up a flag while you're in there. It'll tell you, wait a second, you didn't do this one right. This does not have the proper number of answers. And I don't know at that point if they do a partial credit, if they decide not to count it at all. We don't know. It's a mystery, but they will tell you how many, so you're never going to be able to mess that one up. And they even give you a warning if you happen to go past that question and not put the right number in.
And so if there was 3 answers required and you gave 4 answers, it just wouldn't be fair to do that, because that's like cheating, like saying, "Well, I'll just choose all of them." Right.
I don't know, and maybe they answer the whole thing wrong if you do that. I don't know, but they will tell you, and it will give you
that's
feedback.
What I was saying. Yeah, sure. All right, thank you.
Best of luck. You just never know. They don't tell you with the exam what they grade on. It's a mystery, and that's intentional to be able to do that. They don't want to give away too much of their secret sauce. And I understand that. I understand why they're doing it. It's a little bit more of a challenge to work through. Where do you find a user group? Going back to that question, the chat room's kind of asking that. Meetup.com, that's a legitimate website, meetup.com. You actually find some great meetings there with people in your local area, not just technology, but other things you can do. If you want to go to a hiking group, if you want to find a group that does quilting, if you want to find a group that does anything, they've got a group for those on meetup.com, or just use the Google. Look for Microsoft user group in your particular neck of the woods, and they should be able to make that happen as well. Back to the phones, 202 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, I didn't push the button. Let's try it again. Press the button. There's 202. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Kay.
Hi, Kay. What can we do for you?
I have a question. I'm currently taking the A+ certification course, but my end goal is to be in project management. So I was kind of hoping you could give me an idea of next steps, like another course to take after this one.
There's actually a pretty big group of project managers. The ones I would always see were on LinkedIn, but if you look for the certification for project management, which I think the big one is the PMP, the Project Management Professional certification from the Project Management Institute, that tends to be the big one that project managers like to have, and they have a series of certifications around that. You're absolutely starting in the right place, because I think the best project managers are the ones that really understand the underlying technology. Some of the best ones I ever worked with were in the telecommunications industry. If you've ever had to do anything in telecommunications, for instance, you needed to have a wide area network circuit brought into a building, it is remarkable the number of moving parts that take place on the outside just to be able to make that one thing happen. And having the right project manager who understood the nuances of physics, of politics, of finances, and could blend all of these things together to properly set up the actual Gantt chart, the chart that really lays out the timelines of when things are going to happen. The good project managers, it is so precise. The bad project managers just kind of pick a time and a date out of the air and put it down and say, well, we said it's going to be done Tuesday, so make sure it's done Tuesday. And then we say, but it takes 30 days to get a circuit put in. No, I wrote down Tuesday, so it's got to be Tuesday. So I think PMP and the Project Management Institute is probably going to be the best place to go to start doing your research along those lines. I'm not well versed in the nuances of project management. I probably wouldn't be a very good one, which is probably why I never went there. But I think that would be a great place to go and find other resources. I would bet there's probably a PMP or a Project Management Institute subreddit that would probably get you where you need to go.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that so much.
Best of luck, Kay.
Thank you.
That's so good to have. Whenever you got a good project manager working on these projects, it just changes everything. They are on top of it. It's always good to have a project manager who understands what you have to do. When they just see that install Windows and they don't understand what that is, or upgrade database, and they don't understand that upgrade takes 24 hours. Oh, we had it down for an hour. Well, that's not going to happen. Well, I've already told everybody it'll take an hour, and then now everybody's angry. You never want to be in that situation. So hopefully that's one you can run into when those situations happen. I think it's also a pretty good job too. Someone who's very well organized, it's like the perfect job. You start checking them off the list. And it's not only that, it's really a situation where, as I mentioned, you're sort of combining all these things together. Physics, finances, technology, and in some cases there's an X factor thrown in there too that you have to adjust as this project goes along. A good project manager can save an amazing amount of money. A bad project manager can waste an amazing amount of money. It's a remarkable position to have, and it's hard to find the good ones. Questions from the chat room. Is this an Aeron chair? Herman Miller Aeron chair? It's not. This is a faux Herman Miller Aeron chair that I got from Office Depot 15 years ago, and for some reason still works. Any moment, at any time, I'm expecting that pneumatic cylinder in the middle to completely give out, and I'll fall completely to the floor, probably in the middle of a live stream like this. It's been around for so long. It's just a darn comfortable chair. I can't find it anywhere. It doesn't exist anymore. It was made out of some type of sweatshop in China and presented to Office Depot, and they don't cover it for what they do. So that's a little inside baseball. There's the chair. There's the top of the chair. Has a little pillow. I have looked for another chair. I've considered getting the Herman Miller Aeron chairs, which are ridiculously expensive. But I used to sit in some of those when I would work in other companies that had money. I would go in for a meeting or a presentation, and all of the Aeron chairs would be around the conference table, and they're so comfortable. You can adjust them perfectly. But I don't have one of those. No. It probably cost me $150, and I've gotten every penny out of it. And it's in exceptionally good shape for as long as I sit here all day, every day. I look at my, in Mac OS, it tells you how long your screen time was on your computer. And it's remarkable how much time I'm sitting here throughout the day, because all I do is sit here and write content. So as we're doing that, I'm looking at these numbers. It's good to have a very good chair. I just don't know what the next one would be. I've gotten new chairs for my family for their computers. They've got the racing chairs. You know, that's the big thing with technology today is you need the racing chair. I don't need one of those. I need something more comfortable than that. So maybe it will be the Aeron chair next. I've gotten now 2 of my kids' Aeron chairs, but they're reconditioned or they're from auctions. Quite a remarkable discount you can get for some of those when you find a good reseller of those. And I think I tried it for them, and it turned out so well that I kept that on my list. So the next time I need a chair, I'll probably go back to one of those and get one of those, because I say it's just a chair, but it's pretty darn important for the things I do. That's one of those things whenever you look at the studio, there's the back of the chair, you can see it's not a it's not an air hunt chair. You can see it's not even close. But it's one of those things where it's the little things sometimes. I'm not saying a chair is a little thing, but it sort of is in the bigger picture. Even the in-ear monitors I use, the IEMs, the headphones that I use, they're important. Having the right mouse for my hand, I have this enormous mouse that is literally called a shoe mouse, a mouse shoe, something like that, because it's huge, because your whole hand fits on top of it. An old guy like me needs to have things like that so I can constantly work for many hours just sitting here and typing and getting these things written. Those are things that become pretty important in your day-to-day when you're working with your computing system. You almost don't want to overlook those things. One of the challenges you run into when you work with an organization is that the type of things you have at your desk become very important. What type of chair do you have? If you've ever worked in state, local government, the chairs are almost a sign of your state, of where you fit in the hierarchy. You have to wait for someone to get fired or someone literally to die to be able to take their chair and move it back to your desk. That is the scenario that you don't want to be in with an employer. Hopefully you'll be, every time I ran in these companies where it was nothing but the Herman Miller shares, it was always a financial company. So go work for one of the big two, the big three, the big four, whatever it is now, of the accounting firms. That's what you'll have. For the rest of us, we just hope for the best, I guess. The name of the chair, there's not one. I have looked for the name. All I have is a part number on the bottom from Office Depot. It doesn't even say Office Depot. It's the Office Depot manufacturer, which is some third party, which is just a name of a company in China. And I think they still make Office Depot chairs under that name, but they don't have, this product does not exist anymore. It just doesn't, I can't find it anywhere. I thought I'll get another one and use it for 15 years. Nope, does not exist. So there's a little bit of information, a little behind the scenes, inside baseball of this craziness that is set up here in the studio and all of those things. If you ever want to see what all these things are in the studio, you can go to professormesser.com/studio, where I've documented what I'm using for my camera, what I'm using for my video, what I'm using for my audio mixer, what I'm using for all these different things. Like monitors, in-ear monitors, it's all there at professormesser.com/studio. I need to put that link on my homepage. That'll be something I hopefully can do this weekend in getting those pieces. Yep. So other people, yeah, you must be at the bottom waiting for the good chair. This is the situation we often always find ourselves in. Are you at the bottom waiting for the good chair? That's how you know you've made it, that finally you've got a good chair. Maybe that's our barometer for success in our industry. I was hoping it would be money, but maybe it's just the chair that we're using. It's another reason in the chat room that I don't have a stand-up desk, or I'd be standing all day. Stand-up desks, you kids with your stand-up desks and your good knees, that's something you will find. You will look back on your career and wonder, I had a stand-up desk? That sounds ridiculous. Maybe it isn't now, but it will be. So that's your challenge, is figuring out where you go with this. Another question from the chat room. Can you go directly and take your Security Plus exam without taking your A Plus and Network Plus? Yes, you can. In fact, A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus have no formal prerequisites. Anybody can take any of those exams at any time with no particular requirement. In fact, in those three exams, I took my Security Plus first, I took the Network Plus second, and then I took the A Plus. So I did the reverse of what CompTIA tells you to do. Now, at the time, I was working for a security company. I was working for Network Associates, which was the company that was created when McAfee and Network General merged together. So we were doing tons of security. We had firewalls. We had antivirus. We had the beginnings of intrusion prevention, which was very new at the time. And so I was getting a security certification. I went and got my Security Plus. And then that sort of led me into creating these video series. And so I moved into Network Plus so I could create a Network Plus series, at A Plus so I could create the A Plus series. So For me, it was reversed because of what I needed to do. There are a lot of people that work in the Department of Defense here in the United States, the federal government of the U.S., and Security Plus is one of the entry-level certifications into IT in those organizations. So they don't even care about A+ and Network Plus. At a minimum, they want you to have Security Plus. So a lot of the people that come to my site to take Security Plus, it's their very first cert. They have no IT experience. They need to get this certification because their first entry-level job is with some type of company that is either working with the Department of Defense or working at the Department of Defense. That's not the only certification that you could choose from, but it's probably one of the most popular entry-level certs for DoD. So that's one where you do run into that sometimes. It's not about necessarily what you're the most interested in. It's what your employer is the most interested in. And I got to tell you, they're the ones paying me. Just tell me what certification you'd like me to get. I'll absolutely get that certification. There's plenty of time for you to go back later and get your CCNA. There's plenty of time for you to go back later and get your PMP, to get your VMware, to get your Amazon, to get your Google cert. Some of the most important advice I ever got was that my job description, my job was to make my boss happy. That was really it. It's one line. My job was to make my boss happy. Now, that, of course, meant that I needed to do certain things in my position. There were certain responsibilities I had to take care of. There were certain things I had to do. But as long as your boss is happy, you're good. You're fine. That's the person doing your annual reviews. That's the person determining what you're going to do next project-wise. And it doesn't matter what's written on your job description. That's sort of secondary. It does matter, but that's a secondary thing. The primary thing is making sure your boss is happy. Because if your boss is not happy with you, nothing else is going to matter about your job description, I assure you. So that's one of those situations. This is a good thing in the chat room somebody's mentioning, which is they mentioned many IT positions at law firms require prior experience at a law firm. Well, the irony of that particular requirement is not lost on us. Well, how do they hire anyone ever if that's the requirement that everyone has? And in fact, if you look at requirements for jobs, you may read through some and it says they want you to have an A+ certification. They want you to have a 4-year degree in something technical. They want you to know 3 languages, and they want you to have a broad understanding of worldwide economics. And you're looking at that list of requirements for the job and going, I'm not even going to submit my resume. And that's probably one of the worst things you can think about. If it is a job at the top that says help desk, submit your job posting, submit your resume. Forget about all the things they wish they had in somebody at the help desk, because not everybody submitting their resume is going to fit all of the bullets that they put there. You need to get your name in the list. You need to find out what they're looking for. Maybe you're meeting these people when you go to these companies and you find out, oh, well, I know someone who mentioned this job. They seem to think I was qualified. Let's submit the specifics of this. So don't be swayed, or don't dismiss a job posting for a help desk because you think they're overreaching what type of requirements you're able to provide. It may be that everybody submitting their resume has exactly the same requirements you do. So that's what the important part of this is. And maybe that can help you too as you're going through this. Well, that gets us through another hour. Thanks for being with us in our first hour. We went through all of those A+ questions in that first hour. We do this again on Thursday. Right now, as you're watching this live, it's a Tuesday afternoon here in Florida. We're going to do this again on Thursday for the 220-1002. I've already written the questions. They're already in the hopper. They're already in Socrative. They're just waiting for Thursday to get here. And we would love to have you come back and join us for that as well. You can always find out when the next live event is going to be by going to professormester.com/calendar, and you'll be able to see when our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups happen to be. Thanks for joining us this time. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group.